All right, so we are in the week of November 2nd through the 5th. We are finishing up spinal cord and spinal nerves. We're going to start brain and cranial nerves. So this week you'll have a quiz over chapter 12. Okay. All right. So picking up where we left off. So let's talk a little about the integration and control of spinal reflexes. So we talked in the last video about reflexes, right? So your brain can actually inhibit or facilitate reflex motor patterns that are based in your spinal cord. So the descending tracts, remember, those are the ones that go down from the central nervous, or down from the brain, the spinal cord, or from the brain down to the spinal cord and spinal nerves. They're going to synapse on interneurons and motor neurons all over your spinal cord. And they are always going to be active, okay? Always producing those excitatory postsynaptic potentials and inhibitory postsynaptic potentials at that postsynaptic membrane. Okay, remember those from the previous chapter. Okay, let's talk about reinforcement and inhibition. So the synapses that produce those excitatory postsynaptic potentials, so they can make the postsynaptic neurons more sensitive to other excitatory stimuli. All right, so they can make those neurons more sensitive. Okay? And we use this term reinforcement to enhance spinal reflexes. Right, so you might hear in the movies they talk about, well, let's bring in reinforcements, right? You know, they're talking about bringing in more resources, more support. So it's the enhancement of spinal reflexes. So more on reflexes. So with the plantar reflex, also known as the negative Babinski reflex. So if you strike or stroke the foot of adults on the side of the sole, it's going to result in curling of the toes. So on the side of the sole of the foot, you get curling of the toes. Now, you get a positive Babinski reflex, what's known as a Babinski sign, in infants. So when you stroke infants on the side of the sole, they get fanning of the toes. So the opposite things happen when you're an infant and when you're an adult, okay? So spinal reflexes can be inhibited versus, or as, you know, your plantar reflex in adults versus a Babinski sign in infants, okay? So essentially the reflex that you have is in infants being inhibited, okay, as an adult, all right? All right, voluntary movements and reflex motor patterns. So there are centers in your brain, they can work with motor patterns that are programmed into your spinal cord. You have these descending pathways again, okay, coming down from the brain, and they're going to provide what we call proper facilitation, inhibiting, or fine-tuning of more established patterns, okay? So when you have all these advanced and complicated voluntary movements happening, your spinal reflex neurons can help you coordinate your muscles and control them. So motor control will involve a series of levels that interact with each other. So you get monosynaptic reflexes that start at the lowest level. And at the higher levels, you're going to have centers in the brain, and they can build on or modulate what we call reflexive motor pattern. So reflexive having to do with reflexes. Okay. And these are more, polysynaptic, more complicated. Okay. Medical conditions related to spinal cord and spinal nerves. And remember, underlined diseases are good for matching on exams. So spina bifida means that your lamina on the vertebrae, remember the structure of the vertebrae, and they have the laminas, and they don't unite, okay? Because you have a lamina on each side of the vertebrae. And the meninges are then going to bulge out under the skin of the back, okay? So essentially what's happening is, remember, you're supposed to have a central canal in your vertebra for the spinal cord to go through, right? If instead of being a circle, it's a C with an opening, part of your spinal cord is going to bulge out through there. And so what's on the outside covering of your spinal cord? The meninges. Okay, so that's going to bulge out under the skin of the back, which is not good. So you also have what we call the neural tube defect. Okay, and this is an error in development where part of your spinal cord doesn't form the hollow tube, okay, and exposes your spinal cord, okay, which again is not good. All right, because you want more of a closed area so your neural tube can develop normally. Okay. All right. So that is chapter 13. So what I'd like for you to do now is to discuss what you've learned about reinforcement and inhibition and the positive and negative Babinski reflex. Okay. And you can do that at home as well.